Good morning, afternoon, or evening, listenership. This is the Unsung podcast. This is the cash call that precedes the Unsung podcast, I suppose, if I'm being very technical about it. We are approaching Christmas. That means two things. The first thing, as we all know, is that money becomes an issue, and that is not just for parents, that's for podcasters.
We're broke, guys, we're broke.
because we're slightly broke. Thing number two is that every Christmas we do a special. By every, I mean we've done that once before, and we're going to do it a second time. And for the special, we invite you to submit special questions, like kind of like along the line of the split 7-inch, but we'll kind of go into it in more depth. And like last year we did 2 episodes, we did 4 per episode and kind of went into them, and it was good fun. Plus we got drunk while we did it.
Yay!
So it makes for interesting listening and even more interesting editing. But we are going to do that again. So to combine those two factors, if you sign up for even the most basic subscription fee, which I think is $2 a month, via
patreon.com/unsungpod,
via that, please also take a moment to send in an idea for any stupid ass question relating to stuff we've done, relating to something you want us to do, relating to it doesn't really matter how stupid it is. We'll vet them, that we can include in the Christmas special, and or a split 7-inch along the way, because the split 7 inches go out to subscribers, so you'll get access to all of those as well. We've already had one good suggestion from a funder, which was that we ourselves have to next-eye ourselves to 3 significant figures from the Unsung universe. Wow. Yep, that's going to be one.
I can get to Dave Grohl very quickly.
You don't have Dave Grohl.
You don't have Dave Grohl.
You've got Weird Al Yankovic.
Has it been done?
It's been done. He chose it. He decided who was getting what.
Yep.
All right, okay.
So go on Patreon now. This is a great time to do it, please, as it helps us get set up for the holidays. We're doing a live event. It will help us pay for all of that. And when you sign up, please send us an idea or a question or a request or a challenge for the Christmas specials. And if you're already a funder and you haven't done that, please take a moment to do that as well.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you are a funder, we sent you all a message. Please send us your 3 favourite albums so we can choose an anthem for you.
Yeah.
So we know what we're talking about when we
need something to go on.
Yeah.
So if you're a funder of the podcast, send us your 3 favourite albums and we'll try and pick you a personal anthem that we'll play anytime you get a mention, maybe. Yeah. That I remember editing, like the Prince alarm.
Yeah,
you can all have our own alarm. Yeah, so end of long cash call, but yeah, we need your ideas. Thanks, bye.
Right.
Welcome to the Unsung podcast. Chris has a glass of wine.
Chris has a glass of wine.
It's that kind of night, guys.
His feet are up on the couch and he's got a Pentecostal Good News Church television on in the background with the sound off.
Yeah,
so really welcome to the boudoir.
I've spent a fair number of nights since I last saw you watching, skipping between the various God channels and stuff.
Why not just have a wank instead?
Well, who said I wasn't?
To what? Yeah, exactly.
But skipping between,
that went dark quite quickly, that.
Skipping between the various God channels and just marvelling at the mania.
Pretty manic, eh?
Yeah, so I mean, turn it off by all means, but it is kind of fun that when I look across at you, Mark, you've got people getting all like
flustered.
There's a word where there's a word for it when they're in they get not the rapture. What's it called?
Like speaking in tongues.
Yeah, there's a phrase for that. There's a specific phrase.
There is. I can't remember what it is.
I'll do a really clumsy overdub later on of that word. Anyway, yeah. So that's been the fuel for my week, musing on the absurdity of human nature.
Oh.
Yay. That
no different from any other week.
Sharon Van Etten's album Remind Me Tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Uh-huh.
Mark, what have you been up to?
Nothing much, really. I went to see Thrice and Refused on Sunday night in the
Tell us a bit about the merch
how was
stand.
that?
So it was really good. There was some really nice merch on sale. 50 quid for a hoodie, guys. Which, you know, if you want to pay that, you can pay that. Thrice did have a pair of socks for 15 quid. And the best thing about them was it said on the sole, play Deadbolt, which is like a really old song they never play anymore. I thought it was quite funny. And then there was a really interesting part of the show where, don't get me wrong, Refused are fucking amazing live. And Dennis is like he's
So
like
they're
the
still
front
good?
man. Yeah, they're incredible. And the bar always sounds great.
Yeah.
And Dennis is in his, you know, his tight jeans and his suit jacket and dancing around like a mad cunt after they play like 6 songs or something. They were playing for an hour, so it was a dual headline show. He gives it the whole, you know, anti-capitalist spiel. Like, you know, I think one of the things he said was, where I came from, all the bands that I listened to were political. Bands that were not political were seen as being sellouts. And this is why we talk about politics all the time, and just pretty to say that capitalism was really, really bad, which was great. And I couldn't really agree more with that. But if you're going to be selling 75 quid skate decks that say the shape up come on them, then maybe you can't really talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, and £50 hoodies.
Yeah, that's really weird, man. Like 25 quid for a t-shirt, which is also a bit much.
It's more than a bit much. It's a total rip. I mean, did they give you any sort of non-sweatshop assurance in the...
Absolutely not. I'd imagine not. Yeah.
I was at Charlie XCX on Sunday night, and the t-shirts were only 20 quid. So
Wow.
there you go.
To be fair though, the two of you are both absolutely fucked. I mean, when we spoke about this via the group chat, I did make the point that is end of times patter.
In what way?
Where you're away seeing a pop star who
chooses not to play in large venues and showcases a lot of...
A pop star who sings songs that were written by other people and seems to spend a lot of time without her clothes on because she's incredibly attractive, and a punk band that claims to be communist or at the very, very worst anti-capitalist but sells £50 hooded sweatshirts and tours at the behest of one of the biggest booking organisations in the world.
It was deeply unsettling, but you know, I expected it. Like,
and do you know what? Charlie XCX was really fun, and it was one of the most it seemed like one of the most accepting gigs I've ever been to. It seemed like there were a lot of young people were there. Maybe it was like their first time going out dressed up weird, or going out as a non-binary person or a non-straight person, and like they knew that was a very safe place. That's
a very, very generous spin you're putting on an artist that has been marketed at a specific audience.
Well, who cares? It was really fun. It was very, you know, mainstream pop, but done in a interesting way. I enjoyed it.
Whereas I went to this gig, I wasn't going to see Refused, I was going to see Thrice. I didn't actually know Refused had a new album out until 2 days before the show, and it was 35 quid for a ticket, which is a total fucking bummer anyway. But I like Thrice a lot, and they hadn't played in Glasgow in like 10 years, so I was definitely going to go see them.
Everything about that is fucking stinking.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's bad part, but I fucking love Thrice, man, so I couldn't say no to it.
Literally the only even vaguely passable excuse would be that Refused are like, oh, we're Swedish, these prices are normal in Sweden. Because every single other possible perspective is just fucking rancid, given the rhetoric.
Also, the promotions agency who booked the show completely fucked it because the bars was only half full.
Really?
Yep.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, that's mad.
That is like they could have easily put it in the garage and it would have been a total sellout.
But I mean, there's no way in the world that Refused and Thrice should be playing at a half full bars.
Absolutely no.
I mean,
especially when Refused haven't played here, and especially when Thrice haven't played here in like a decade.
I knew literally, I think maybe 100 people that travelled down to the Refused show in Manchester alone.
Mm-hmm. And I think Refused played the garage a couple of years ago and they sold it out. So yeah, it was really strange to see it being literally half full. Like you could easily walk between people in a crowd. There was loads of space around the back.
But I think, you know, when Refused played last time, that was like, holy shit, Refused are back and they're touring, and that's exciting, and I always wanted to see them when I was 18. Whereas now Refused have been back and have released an album that is shit. So it's like, oh, I probably won't go.
Maybe it's just that the commies didn't go this time because they finally got sick of it.
They were all at Charlie XCX.
The new album sounds a bit like AC/DC as well, which is not good.
Yeah. Oh well, so what are we doing this week, Christopher?
We're doing as I mentioned, the album Remind Me Tomorrow by the artist Sharon Van Etten.
So this record immediately takes a new record for Unsung for the
2019.
The latest release.
I don't think
least time since we
don't have a 2018 record, do we? I think the closest.
No, I mean
it was Kalila 2016, 2017.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what the least time between a release and us covering it was, because we've been doing this for nearly 2 years. So,
I mean, this is easily the.
I think
this is actually probably the only album we've covered that has come out since the podcast started.
Yeah, it's a bold choice to pick one that's come out so.
It wasn't without due consideration though, because I was going to suggest Sharon Van Etten, maybe even a different record at an earlier stage, but this album is interesting to me for a few reasons, because it's quite a distinctly different sound from how I think a lot of people imagine Sharon Van Etten. And I also think track by track, I was trying to remember, trying not to view it through the lens of being 38 years old, but try to view it through the lens of being 18 years old, when I used to throw compilation tapes together and really obsess about specific tracks. And the likes of Nevermind, I got incredible mileage from all the different tracks in Nevermind, or all the different tracks in Vitalogy by Pearl Jam, putting them alongside tracks by other artists, kind of doing the domino thing of this is Pearl Jam, but this actually sounds more like R.E.M. or this kind of thing. And I was thinking about the tracks in this album, and they're actually very, very varied. Some of them go from really classic kind of 80s power pop mainstream MOR kind of Springsteen rock, all the way through to showing how much Sharon Van Etten's into Portishead and things like this. And I think that kind of variety, when pulled apart, because I don't right off the bat, I don't think it's a particularly solid concept of an album throughout. I think it is literally a collection of good songs, but I thought that was really actually a very strong collection of good songs, and a collection of good songs that if I was 18 I would probably have ripped to bits and put one in a mixtape for a girl I liked, and another couple in a mixtape for a car, and sent another couple to my friends when we were on the way to band practice or something like that. This kind of thing, I think it's an album that bears getting kind of pulled apart because the tracks work well. As a result, I mean, there's also a lot of singles on it, for that reason, I think. It's obviously is it a classic? It's too soon to tell, but I do know it's a very, very strong set of songs that
also, is it unsung? Maybe that's too soon to tell as well. It seems it's been fairly well received so far, and we haven't yet seen the end of year lists.
No, that's true, but then I think what I would maybe look at is that she has had many, many, many albums over the years. In fact, I think, to be honest, her last 4 records have all received critical acclaim, increasingly so. Yet if you look at festival bills and stuff, she's never really up amongst the big hitters on festival bills, despite substantial critical acclaim as she went. So I don't really get the feeling that Sharon Van Etten's ever really going to break that. I think when you see the way that she performs, she is writing these songs, there's a lack of finesse maybe to some of her songs that I think actually sometimes makes them more endearing, but also sort of inherently limits the potential success of them. I think that's true of some of the songs in this album, that they're written by her. She hasn't got multiple industry voices in her ear saying to her, well, if you tweak that and tweak that, you could be looking at a top 10 single. I don't think that really happens. I actually think sometimes she misses a trick with a couple of her tunes, but that's just how she writes. And I kind of get the feeling she's never really going to get beyond that particular level, but that's alright. She's fucking great live. She was on the BBC's Glastonbury coverage this year. They covered her set and it's terrific. It's really interesting to watch how she works live as well. She has a band round her in a semicircle. I think it was 5 musicians, keys, drums, that kind of thing, and she goes in the middle, in the centre of the stage, and she basically conducts the show from the centre with the band round her, all working off her cues. So she's turning round to them and bringing them in and bringing them out, bringing them up, bringing them down. You can see she's got little signals for changing frequencies or lifting a filter. It's really fascinating to watch that in those live shows, because she is the boss of that band. That is her project, and she's grown into this project over it's about 16 years she's been doing it now, since she very first started out. So no, I think she's an interesting case study. I don't see her ever really bursting through some ceiling and ending up, with some massive chart album. She doesn't even market herself like that, and she's just, I think she's found her niche, she's found her level.
It's interesting. I feel like there are a lot of female artists out like that right now.
Well, I've made a note of that. I actually feel like it was probably even more so the case between about 2008 and 2010 when she first arrived, and she was doing very much the singer-songwriter thing, guitar and voice with the occasional bit of piano or something like that. And there was a glut of those artists. There was an absolute mass of them just arrived suddenly. It's such a
certainly, it's interesting. I wonder if that's like a I don't know, like an empowerment thing, and females have seen acts like, I don't know, Tori Amos and PJ Harvey, and have gone, oh fuck it, I can actually do this. And that was maybe one wave of it, and then I feel like we're definitely getting another wave right now. I
would agree with that. I think also though there's an element of pragmatism to it, because this is 2008 for example was 5 years after that sort of initial massive crash in the remuneration that was coming off record sales. They were right on the serious part of the downslope there, and they were struggling to cope, and it was becoming obvious that touring was going to be one of the main sources of revenue, and also it was becoming obvious that synth was going to become one of the main sources of revenue. And so touring a single female soul acoustic artist, or male acoustic artist, but in this case female, was such a viable and financially affordable thing to do. And also this music, because of its sort of indie credentials, just lends itself so easily to sync options, films, TV, advertising, that I think it's a genre that it suffered as a result of those factors, because I think there's an overabundance of really average people in this genre, but I do believe that she's by far one of the best at it. And I think she probably, although she was part of that movement, such was the quality of what she was putting out, that her gravity affected a change on the people around her and set something of a standard. Yeah,
there's certainly artists out there that are contemporaries of her or have been influenced by her that are maybe playing similarly sized venues or even larger now with her. I was just going to do a list of them, because I think you've got to be shit hot to stand out. And
very true, yeah.
So you've got Sharon Van Etten, but then you've got Angel Olsen, you've got Mitski, you've got Jessica Pratt. Wise Blood, who played in a sold out art school last night. Jenny Lewis, Phoebe Bridgers, Lucy Dacus, Aldous Harding, Cat Power. Who's obviously been around for a little longer, but Julie Byrne, Julian Baker, Waxahachie, Marissa Nadler, Tiny Ruins, Angie McMahon, Japanese Breakfast, Jessica Hoop, Natalie Prass, Julia Jacqueline. Like, they're all doing quite similar things.
Oh yeah, and we're scraping the surface.
Yeah, and that's just artists that will play in Glasgow to busy rooms.
Absolutely. So it's clearly, like, I think you're right. There's definitely a factor in there, which is to do with the empowerment of women and women feeling more engaged and represented by the music industry. That was nice. It's a very positive thing to come from it. But I do think it's a difficult genre to navigate as a result of that. Just the sheer scale of that deluge of artists in this area. It does make me wonder sometimes, given that some of the artists are so close that you could get a slip of paper between their sound, it's very fine margins of what differentiates them. And I wonder whether, when the margins are that tight, how do you distinguish between a truly great artist in that field and a fairly average one in that field? And is that a moment where good marketing can have an unwieldy amount of influence over who makes it and who doesn't? So you could have artists, and I would argue there probably are artists that have really struggled to kind of rise above the crowd, even though they probably deserve it to some extent, and it's maybe largely to do with the fact that their management, and maybe a wee bit of luck, didn't quite happen the way it did for others who I don't think are necessarily any better, if not as good. I'll give some examples as we're going through her actual material, but I think via sheer consistency, as well as talent, Sharon Van Etten managed to sort of leave a lot of them behind, a little bit of the kind of tortoise and hare thing, because some of them did get massive amounts of promo early on and weren't able to sustain it. But she had good album. These are albums I didn't initially warm to, I'll be honest. I wasn't really a huge fan of Sharon Van Etten for a long time. One of my ex-girlfriends was, and exposed me to it, and there were definitely parts of it that was like, this is a lot better than most of what else I'm hearing, but I'm still not feeling drawn in. It wasn't until recently that she started making music that I actually felt like I connected with. Music that when it was on, I was stopping what I was doing and paying attention, going up to bars, going up to cafes and asking, what is this you're playing? And started to notice more and more that the name that was coming back was the same one. I was like, oh, I've heard her before, but this seems more dynamic. This seems a bit more lusty and energetic than the kind of previous stuff. So I think she's just, by virtue of just consistency, as well as I say, like a good base level of voice and songwriting, has managed to just push beyond that pack as they've slowly fallen away. And so, yeah, maybe now is a good time to address that genre, because, or at least that wave of that genre, because much of the average stuff has kind of drifted back. And albeit this is a recent record by this artist, she's an artist with a lot of pedigree and who has, paid her dues and who has modernised her sound as she's gone till now. I think she's at something quite dynamic. I mean, to that end, I've got quite a lot to say about the songs in the album, but I'll do a very quick skim of her career. She was born in 1981 in New Jersey, and after a number of moves around the States, more or less ended up living in New York City from about 2005. I think that's relevant because this, and not just this artist, but many of these artists sound so New York City. They just, and more so than that, they sound very Brooklyn. They sound like so many people's ideas of an indie film. They sound like,
I mean, there's a definite musical callbacks to 3 episodes ago in Interpol. They're not the same in any way, but you definitely get little hints from each other that they have foundations in the same place.
I think there's just a lot of like really kind of quite pleasant but sort of mildly amusing cliches that do come to mind with a lot of these records and a lot of these artists, male and female. That's sort of like Brooklyn coffee shop, heavy wood furniture, candles everywhere, kind of hot, bookish, nerdy indie girl that wears heavy jumpers and everything's like late autumnal, or kissing somebody under a streetlight as the first flakes of snow start to fall down, brisk winters and big stylish wool coats. There's something very indie movie, slightly idealised, the way that I think Brooklyn is in the minds of a lot of people. It's that very kind of liberal, modern, progressive society with lots of music and art everywhere. It's, albeit I think one of the other connotations of Brooklyn is it's quite middle class, and it's not necessarily always very self-aware of how trite and absurd it can sometimes be. So I think this does encapsulate that. And as you mentioned, I think her early work's really reminiscent of Cat Power, who again is to me just very suggestive of that lifestyle. She early on she'd released, I think it's 4 or 5 like records worth of material that she self-released in Brooklyn. I think she was just recording it herself and she just put it out to friends and labels and sent it about the place. Her first proper record is called Because I Was in Love from 2009. It came out in Drag City, which is not bad for your first record to come out on a label as cool as that, with as much of a reputation as that. I'd say about 95% of that album is just vocal and acoustic guitar. There's bits and bobs of extra instrumentation, but it's very of a kind, as we say, of the style that was pretty ubiquitous between 2008 and 10. The album after that was called Epic. Now it's only 7 tracks, but it's still fairly commonly referred to as an album. A friend of mine, when she found out we were doing this, said that is the number 1 breakup record that she owns. I don't actually find it that sad an album. Maybe that's why she likes it, because it's a little bit uplifting. It has some really, really strong songwriting on it. For an album that's only 7 tunes, it's too brief maybe, but the second track, Peace Signs, and that is a standout amongst her catalogue. It's better than the first track on it. The track Save Yourself is a countryish vibe. It's really reminiscent of another singer-songwriter from this era called Dawn Landes.
Tomorrow night, fireworks will fill the sky. Fireworks will fill the sky.
Who was from Kentucky but who moved to Brooklyn, obviously. She's got an album called Fireproof. It's really good.
I know it's probably a bit gauche to bring it up, but I think that when she goes more country, it reminds me a lot of Ryan Adams.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, as far as male references go, Neil Young, Ryan Adams are two that come up in a lot of the interviews that not just Sharon Van Etten, but other artists in that bracket that do. The song Don't Do It on this is a really anthemic kind of builder. It's a big progression from her earlier minimalist sort of strummy stuff, and the track One Day is just the archetypal coffee shop tune.
Call me your side and I will now be, and I will be fine with that. You don't leave me now, you might love me back.
It's a tune that I have heard in so many different little hipster West End coffee bars in Glasgow, and that, as I say, this is one of the first ones where I was going up to the counter and saying, sorry, who is this again? I know this, I've asked this before, and this one for me really sums that up. She followed that album in 2012 with an album called Tramp.
When you listen in a color of sorrow, you're over me. You with eyes through.
Which was actually produced by the guy Aaron Dessner of the National. So I mean, that's sort of consistent with that kind of aesthetic as well. It's a lot more sophisticated actually, that album. It's a bit more melancholy as well. There's some really standout tracks in it.
Totally.
The tune Give Out, the tune Serpents.
Serpents is great, man.
Yeah, they're really good. They're actually the first 2 tunes that I heard via an ex-girlfriend, and yeah, they really did leave a bit of a mark, because I had her written off as something a bit simplistic, and they demonstrate a lot more depth to the songwriting. There's a track in that called We Are Fine, which was pretty popular, but is honestly so close to the track The Greatest by Cat Power, it's unreal, which I think it was released prior to that as well. This is the record where the double track vocals really start to become quite a strong motif, and it's an inventive and definitely an interesting album, but for me there are no bullseye killer tunes on it. I think it lacks real focal points.
Yeah, I like listening to it. It's sort of good, glass of wine,
exactly,
background music, dinner party background music.
It's exactly that. It's pleasant and it's consistent throughout, without ever really peaking. And you never are telling people that if you're having a dinner party conversation, you're never like, shh, guys, listen to this bit. It's not one of those albums. You're quite okay with it just on in the background. 2014 she did Are We There? Crucially, no question mark. Apparently that's important. Much bigger as an album, much more euphoric. It was largely self-produced alongside a guy called Stuart Lerman, and I think it's a really overtly romantic album. It's really winsome.
It's very loungy, but not in a lounge, not like a lounge music sense, but it's very like relaxed.
The chords and the pacing of it are quite loungy, but the production's quite big on it. Totally. It's way bigger than anything she'd done before, including the arrangements as well. There's quite a lot. When she builds a song in this album, there are layers of things that come in that maybe didn't in the past, and there's production techniques that are used as well, like bits of delay getting ramped up and things, but it has some really interesting touches and some great tunes on it actually.
I really like this record, but I felt like it lagged a bit towards the end. I definitely thought it was front heavy.
Absolutely agree.
I thought Afraid of Nothing, Taking Chances, and Your Love Is Killing Me were all really good. and then like Our Love is quite a big song.
After track 6, though, it starts to really fade.
The last 3 songs are basically completely interchangeable. I know it's like they all sound exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, you actually mentioned a few of the standouts that I agree with. Taking Chances has some really interesting percussion. It's sexier and more sultry, and it's closer. It's like it pulls you into the mix. It's not a big song. It pulls you quite close. I think track 3, Your Love Is Killing Me, is really probably the high point of her career at this stage. Very Nick Cave influenced in that kind of like was it Ship Song? Is that what it's called? It's like one of those big Nick Cave ballads. I mean, I think if he'd written that tune, people would be absolutely raving about it. It's just the way it builds up. It also demonstrates what a good voice she has when she wants to use that voice. On that tune, there are some really astonishing vocal performances that I didn't actually think she had in her. I thought she was one of those singers that relished the fragility of the voice. But I think on this record, it's when I realised she actually does have a set of lungs, man. She can really sing. She'd kind of been downplaying it to this point, whereas I think a lot of her peers had probably hit their level with their voice and they couldn't push it to that next level. Our Love is really good. It's got a kind of Princey quality to the guitar in it as well. And I Love You But I'm Lost, I think, is very reminiscent of a group called Shearwater, who she's worked with. But yeah, I mean, and all of those got increasingly high marks on, the likes of Metacritic, the likes of Pitchfork and things like that.
Brooklyn Vegan, yeah. And it's nice to see an artist with a steady rise like that, who is not having identity crisis in such a way that they dismantle everything they've done. They're constantly building. And I do think this new album, and that's actually the first time we're able to say that, this new album, I do think this new album that she's done, the album that we're doing today, Remind Me Tomorrow, is in keeping with that. But it does take it up a good couple of steps this time. It takes it up into a much more considered territory.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure if she chose to work with John Congleton because she was demoing stuff that's a bit different, or if John Congleton pushed her to go more down this road with her arrangements and stuff. Yeah, so
John Congleton, who's a producer that we've mentioned a number of times, he's a great musician actually as well, but a producer especially of note, who's done everything from like Celine Dion and Marilyn Manson right down to really interesting art rock records. He's very, very good at, as you said, putting a very stylistic stamp on things. Like, she's doing something a lot more stylised, and whether or not the decision was made to go with Congleton or whether he heard the tunes and was like, why don't you try something a bit different and push the boat out, I'm not entirely sure, but it's a combination that I think works tremendously well.
I think in some songs his influence is clearly a lot, actually, because there are some tunes that sound like Chelsea Wolfe on this record. I
think she's quite clearly been listening to not just a lot of like classic stuff. I mean, there's a lot of PJ Harvey, we'll obviously go through the tracks, but there's a lot of things like PJ Harvey that have not just informed her now but informed her whole career. But I think there's much more in the way of contemporary influences shining through, and I think Chelsea Wolfe is definitely one of them.
Yeah, because Congleton worked with her on 2 records, 3 records I think it was.
And he also worked with St Vincent, which is kind of the other side of this record.
Yeah,
like you've got the darker, gothier parts, which are definitely got that Chelsea Wolfe thing, and then those sort of 80s sparkly sort of tangly bits, which are definitely more like St Vincent.
One of the things I think, I don't know whether it's intentional either, but the title Remind Me Tomorrow, I do like that sort of the idea of a near future retrospective, in the sense that this album is a very new thing, but it seems to be summoning a lot of influences from the near and not so near past. I think there's a lot of 80s stuff in here. I think there's chunks of Pat Benatar and Roxette in this, for example.
Susie and the Banshees as well.
Yeah, Susie and the Banshees. And whether or not that does inform the title, I don't know, but it does seem quite apt. As I said, I don't think it's an album with a particularly coherent through line, and I actually have significant reservations about the sequencing of the album as a result. I think it's a batch of songs that has been assembled in probably an order that doesn't maximise the impact of the songs. And I mean, okay, a lot of these would be experienced as singles, and I know albums are not as big a priority now, but I think you could easily assemble this album slightly differently, and what do feel like, I would say, weaker songs. There's not, in my opinion, there's not any bad songs in this record, but the ones that struggle more than others wouldn't if they were sequenced more favourably, in my opinion. Starting with I Told You Everything.
Sharing a shot, you held my hand, knowing everything, knowing everything.
Which is a very downbeat intro, and maybe if you haven't yet heard reviews of this album, or you haven't yet heard one of the singles, could lull you into the sense that this is going to be quite an introspective, quite a dark thing.
It's a very measured beginning to the
It's
record.
very measured. It's very mature. It's like, it's one of the examples of her taking the work she'd done previously and really just refining it. I think it's just a much more refined version of some slightly clumsier attempts that had happened previously. The instrumentation on that record, in this track, is so simple. Those piano stabs, even the drums are just kick, snare, hat, kick, snare, hat. It's ultra simple.
We knocked knees as it started. I told you.
Congleton actually plays quite a lot in this album, and his layers of synths in the backgrounds of tracks like this are very subtle, but they do flesh them out in a way that sometimes it's actually quite imperceptible.
Yeah, builds it up really slowly. And that's another thing that I think he's definitely big into this, is like not just the fact he's putting in a lot of synths, which there's a lot on this record, whether they're
drones as well.
Yeah, whether they're deliberate, big or small. But like most of the stuff that we've covered by him, or that we've spoken about by him, with possibly the exception of Baroness, the sounds in this record are just generally good as well. You know what I mean? The production's great, but there's a lot of well chosen textured sounds as well, which really, really help lift it and give it an atmosphere which other records just don't have.
I think, as you're saying, like about the synths, it's interesting to hear someone approach a drone from a musical perspective, because there's notes that it's just a single note sustained with quite a granular texture. But it's delicate enough that it fits with the track. But it's unusual enough that it distinguishes the track from just, because stripped right back, it could be quite a predictable song. But it does seem like there's a great fusion of the songwriter and the producer in this piece. There's a real focus on the vocal in this, and I think it's such a good vocal performance. And the lyrics as well are really, really affecting in this. I think the specific standout lines, like "we held hands," the harmony on that, and the end, I think just the end section about "I had no idea" is the delivery is so lovely, it's so understated. I think it's a very, very good opening tune, albeit not entirely illustrative of what follows. Now, and right off the bat, I would say for me, they got tracks 2 and 3 wrong. I do think they're good songs, but I think track 4, Come Back Kids, should have been the second tune. But going at it in order, No One's Easy to Love is a very nice song. It's an early change of tone.
The resistance to feeling something that you put down before, but keep quiet.
It's got these dark bass throbs that are much more like sort of To Bring You My Love era PJ Harvey, when PJ Harvey started really like leaning into our production side of things to kind of add more variety to quite simple compositions. And that is darker. That is a much more sinister approach. The tempo of this song is just slow enough. It feels like it's maybe 5 to 10 BPM below where most people would play it. But as a result, it gives it a sort of druggy effect. And the fact that it maintains that, you're almost willing it to speed up just a fraction, but it doesn't. I also think like the vocal line in the chorus is really interesting, because she goes for this really unusual note. there's a lot of ways that the second part of the line could have gone, and instead she bends back up quite awkwardly into this slightly uncomfortable note.
I felt that was a bit Beatlesy, actually. I think the melody in the song is a bit Beatlesy, which I wasn't expecting at all. Having heard their back catalogue.
I will say one thing about that note choice and that chorus. When you listen to this, folks, you'll see what I mean. You'll know the note that I mean straight away. When she does it live, when I was watching the Glastonbury show, I was thinking to myself, the audience don't know that she's trying to go for that note. It sounds like she's gone and failed for a higher note. And that was the only thing that kind of sat weird about it, was that in the live performance, if you were seeing her on a bill where you weren't there to see her and you didn't already know the song, it felt like it might be a mistake. But when you hear it in the context of the album, it's actually a very nice touch, because it muddies up what's quite a clean bit of music. The third track, Memorial Day, again, really stylised. It could have been written and performed, and probably would have been written and performed much more simply on one of her earlier albums.
Super Portishead.
Yeah, this is what she said that in interviews as well. There were certain influences, bands like Suicide, bands like Portishead. It is very apparent in this. It's again quite ghostly and quite druggy, that kind of ketamine vibe that we've spoken about with other artists.
Well, I felt kind of neon soaked to me, like it's like the end of the night. It's like you're heading towards the after party and everything's so fucking bright, even though it's really dark.
You're a bit drunk, you're a bit tired, everyone's a little bit foggy and you can't focus right.
Cinematic.
There's a lot, listening through it as well, there's a lot of really, really interesting little glitchy percussive noises that break up the actual track itself. They don't recur, they're just randomised, I think. Most of them anyway, but what it does do is it breaks up the symmetry of the song, because again, it's a song that if you just recorded it, you know, start to end, A to B, it could be quite basic. And I think I don't want to say unfussiness, because it's not accidental, it's a very deliberate production decision, but muddying it and dirtying it and soiling it with these little marks, you know, it's like doing a painting and then just splashing those kind of dots around the painting at the end to give it an energy and to give it a ruggedness that I think it really, really helps the tune overall.
Yeah, I find that interesting that you say that, because it's kind of like they have done. It's like they've taken a photo with a digital camera and then added a filter on at the end.
Exactly, yeah.
Rather than, I think she used to always just use a film camera, which had that natural graininess in it.
Yeah, it had the natural graininess, but at the same time, I think her previous compositions were too perfect. They were too nice. They were too sweet, and they were too symmetrical. As I say, I think what Congleton said is that this could get boring. This could get a little bit insipid if we don't break it up. It's the lime in your drink. You know, it's the little bit of it's a little acidic touch that just stops it being a bit too sickly. Now, when the album for me really gets serious, and I think it hits a run of just honestly terrific songs here, is track 4, Comeback Kid, which was a big single off of this, at least scale wise for her. I think this should have been track 2. I think going from how good the opening tune was into something as energetic as this would have been an absolute stick-on, amazing introduction to a record. That said, it means that the middle section of this album is so fucking strong. Big tune, really great vocal performance, really lean songwriting. She's got a really strong baritone in this, and this is the one where you're talking about like the Interpol New Yorkie romantic vibe. It has that really classic 80s feel of people like Pat Benatar, who I fucking love Pat Benatar, but Pat Benatar especially in tracks like Sex as a Weapon, where she's at her most forceful and sort of almost aggressive. It's not aggressive, but it's definitely very assertive.
You know you're already my
Yeah, and just the fact that it's, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, ends. No lingering about, no extra solos, no returning to the verse for one last flurry, and it's retrospective and it's perspective. It's looking at a lot of tracks from the 80s, but it's very modern in its delivery, and it bears a lot of repeated listens. It's one that I would have thrown onto a lot of compilation tracks for people.
It's interesting. I mean, I think I like it. I think it's a good song, but it's not hugely different from a lot of other indie right now. I don't think it's out of place in a club either, to be honest. But there's some, like I said, some awesome sounds in it. Some awesome sounds in that song, and the chorus is awesome too.
Yeah, I think it sticks out as it's definitely a single on this record, but for me, it's not the singles that I like on this record. I like her understated stuff.
Well, a lot of people, I think, the reason that this album means so much to them, at least the folks I know that are into it was because they got it because they quite liked the singles, but then they loved the album tracks. The fifth track in this, Jupiter 4, is an excellent change of pace.
Try to relate in my state, and the all around me says.
This is the most Chelsea Wolf.
Yeah, there's a sample in here. There's that creepy sample in the background that was definitely used on Abyss. It's the exact same sound.
That's Big John recycling. Save the planet.
Totally. And so the weird effect in her voice is using a Chelsea Wolf song.
Yeah.
Only it's very subtle here, whereas she goes to town on it. It's like a kind of weird lisp thing almost. Kind of hissy, whispery thing. I think both of those things are on the same Chelsea Wolf song as well.
I mean, he's dialed the goth up to 10 in
Absolutely.
this one. Absolutely, yeah. And also, I think her sensibilities as regard vocal harmonies really remind me of some of the most bold and heartfelt Roxette ballads. And I have such a soft spot for Roxette, honestly. Yet through that gothy filter, it sounds a lot more contemporized. Ironically, I suppose. That line in it, baby, 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 I've been waiting my whole life for someone like you, is just so big. And it's one of the kind of tunes that I think could appeal right across boundaries to people like Lana Del Rey fans. It's that kind of.
I mean, yeah, Lana Del Rey takes an awful lot from this genre and then puts that mainstream gloss onto it.
Yeah. This has the level of production and the level of shameless sort of romanticism that I think would endear Sharon Van Etten to Lana Del Rey fans were she able to get something of that level of exposure. Yeah, I think as well in this, the construction of this track, as the synths get denser, verse upon verse, right up to I think it's about 3 minutes 24, 25, the song just gets so gushy. It just gets huge. There's a last kind of like push of synth layers. I just think it's fantastic. It's over the top, but it's fucking brilliant. It's exactly what I want from a ballad. It's just what I want from It Must Have Been Love. It's just what I want from Spending My Time. It's just what I want from that tune. The sixth tune in this, 17, is another well-worn single for alternative radio, sort of Radio 6 type thing.
I used to be 17, now you're hot shot, hanging on my block, sun coming up.
I will say, I wish the song had just started with a drum beat. I don't like the fade in. I think the fade in makes it sound like a radio edit to me because it's quite a short tune. And I wish it had just come straight in.
I don't mind it either.
I think it's because the fade in, if you imagine the sort of the parabola, the fade in's only just finished when she starts singing, and for me that's I don't want that. I want the track to be developed or established at least a little bit before the voice comes in. Otherwise, it does just feel like an edit to me. Odd.
But it is a big track.
Oh, it's a huge track. It's the kind of Bruce Springsteen style
it's
track. Patti Smith, maybe even a bit of Tom Petty.
This would definitely sit on Born in the USA. No fucking question. Can sit alongside any of those tracks. And it's good. It's great for it as well. I like it.
Yeah, the sentiment of the tune as well, that whole kind of nostalgic, about being 17 and about what you've learned and how you've changed and how your perspectives have changed. It was, I think, this album, if not this track, features one of the guys from the War on Drugs. Is that right? Or is that the previous record?
I think it's the previous record.
Right, okay. So, and again, they're tapping into that same vein, that same modern incarnation of Springsteen and Petty and
Patty. They're garbage, so.
They're definitely inconsistent. But yeah, that kind of 1982 to 1985 spirit is just so strong in this one. There's a kind of noisy, glitchy synth as well that I think prevents it being too straight, and I love it. Just the pre-last chorus where she takes the vocals up a whole register, goes up an octave and starts really belting it out.
It's like that gated fuzz guitar in the middle 8 as well, with the las, which is just so fucking cool.
Yeah, the la 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 thing is that's fucking brilliant. Yeah, it's incredibly simple and can be jarring, but it's used just the right amount in this.
Sharon Van Etten.
Oi.
Speaking of Springsteen, there's definitely a lot of that in Malibu, I think.
Well, I would say Malibu is probably my favourite track in the album. I think it's absolutely gorgeous.
Good song, yeah.
Yeah, it's another one that I think would have a lot of success with the Lana Del Rey audience.
Well, Larry Can vocal melody is basically 80s Springsteen.
Yeah.
I love it. Not because of that, but it's a really good string to add to the bow.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of a sister track to the opening tune. I think it's got a similar feel, and it also kind of shows the sort of, it builds upon the sort of work done by people like Tori Amos when she was at her kind of most straight ahead, that piano led sort of balladry that she used to do when she wasn't feeling quite so weird. It's again very vocal focused, and given how well Sharon Van Etten can sing when she chooses to, it benefits from that.
Just a couple of dudes who don't give a fuck. Tap the brakes and we slow down. Just a couple of jokers on the edge of town.
And the production again as well is really subtle but very effective in it. There's a really cool noise out ending. Like the ending of this song is actually very strange and counterintuitive for something that's so commercially viable.
I think this was a single as well.
Was Malibu a single?
I think it was.
There you go. That would make 5 or 6, I think. That synth solo that comes in at 1 minute 16 is terrific as well. Like really good early break of pace. Track 8, You Shadow, is probably, I think, the most reminiscent of her previous work, especially the stuff on Epic.
I've got that as well. The most traditional, quote unquote traditional.
Although I do think the interesting production touches take it up a bit of a level from that earlier stuff.
You ain't nothing, you never done nothing wrong. You don't do nothing, I don't do your shadow. Listen until you know what to say.
It's the jauntiest song on the record, definitely, and there's a beautiful little synth that's meant to sound like a glockenspiel. Well, a lot of delay and reverb that I think really adds kind of makes the song, because the song could have been a bit one-dimensional, but the synth touches in the back of this, I think, again, whether that's come from her or Congoln or a combination of both, it's worked really, really well. I do also think the wee kind of synths imitating the brass ensemble are pretty handy as well.
I think that sort of squelchy staccato lo-fi synth, that ruins it for me. I find it really irritating.
Yeah.
I love the sounds, that's particularly the organ sound actually. It's got a really churchy feel almost.
Where I am, you ain't nothing, you never won. You ain't nothing, you never done nothing wrong. You don't do nothing, I don't do your shadow.
But yeah, that staccato organ synth sound is just annoyed the hell out of me.
I see, I quite like that one.
I don't mind it.
Yeah. Track 9, Hands. think
Strange.
I think this is one of the biggest nods to old school PJ Harvey, and I think being somebody that's a huge fan of PJ Harvey, I see a lot of different flavours from different parts of her careers as well. There's moments that are a bit more akin to sort of Stories from the City. There's, as I mentioned earlier, there's a couple of moments, especially with the kind of more squelchy, staccato, bassy synths that are a lot more akin to Bring You My Love, that kind of era. But this has got more of a kind of grainy, grungy feel to it, which I think is consistent with some of her earlier work. And it's quite a sinister tune. I think there are Chelsea Wheel flavours in it, but overall I think it betrays that love of PJ Harvey. I mean, Sharon Van Etten says, readily admits in interviews as well, how big a fan she was of Sonic Youth and the kind of alternative indie rock of the 90s. She says that's what made her want to do it, and it really shows, I think, in this tune. But I mean, I like that song. I like that song because I grew up on those influences, and I think it's a nice reimagining of them.
Yeah, I think the production is really strange in this song, and I like it because of that. There's a lot of different weird samples in it and stuff as well, which I found quite interesting. It made it more engaging than it otherwise could have been for somebody that's not got a huge amount of love for those kind of 90s influences. Mm-hmm. I really did enjoy the whole arrangement.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The 10th track, is Stay, is actually quite an unusual way to finish for me. It's probably the most optimistic track in the album.
Mm-hmm.
The electronic percussion in this, I think, distinguishes it from a lot of what else has been going on.
Yeah.
And I think, again, there's hints of some of the later era Shearwater stuff, which, this is somebody she's collaborated with. There's a lovely, quite fluid, quite mobile bass line in this one, combined with the little sparkles of glockenspiels that were quite fragmented over the top of the mix. It's a very sweet ending to the album.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't know if it was a guitar harmonics or a glockenspiel, because they sound quite similar.
Having seen her playing live, you actually do see which parts are which, or which have been interpreted live in different ways. It's the Glastonbury's set on the BBC, which you won't be able to see if you're outside of this country unless you do something naughty.
I think some of it's on YouTube.
Yeah, okay. Well, if you're able to see that on YouTube, it's a really interesting way to revisit this record, because you see how she conducts it live, and she really does conduct it, and it's great. It makes me like it more watching the live show. Yeah,
that you knew that she was in complete control of how it sounded.
She is the boss.
The beginning,
yeah, it's brilliant. So, I mean, I know it's a gamble, and I know it's a recent album, but I was trying to put myself in the mindset of me as a younger guy, because what we've talked about is, like, a lot of the time the problem with albums is I wasn't there at the time. It's like, this sounds like it could be a good album, but I wasn't there at the time.
Yeah.
And I am dead certain, especially after having given it a serious doing this week, that this is an album that, had I been 18 or 20, would have been on heavy rotation.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, 15, 20 years later, would have been an album that I had a lot of nostalgic love for. Even if it's not perfect, and it isn't perfect, but it's got some outstanding singles on it. It's got some great album tracks that are probably going to be more rewarding in the long run than the singles, and it's got a couple of slightly more difficult tracks, which the more I've listened to, the more I've liked, which is a good sign, because that's most of the bands that I grew up loving. There were always a few tracks that I'm like, I don't know about that one, and then 5 years later, 6 years later, that's the only one I was listening to. So I think it's probably got a longevity that maybe some of our earlier stuff doesn't have, and a lot more imagination. So no, I'm going to take a swing for it, and mainly, if nothing else, for the people that haven't listened to it and maybe have written Sharon Van Etten off as just some one-dimensional coffee shop Brooklynite sort of singer-songwriter. Like, she is a really, really, really good songwriter.
I think she's the real deal. I think she's got some fucking brilliant tunes throughout her back catalogue, without
Absolutely.
a doubt.
I'll throw a playlist together, actually, based on some of the ones that we like.
Yeah, and there's maybe, I don't know, Tramp and Are We There even are probably records that I like the sound of more to begin with, because I just kind of like that more stripped back and more personal element. But in all honesty, they do kind of get a tad boring by the end. Whereas this album, although I'm aware that it's just a little bit glossier, it holds my attention for longer.
She's got a good sense of brevity as well.
It's a nice 10 track,
tracks,
41 minutes.
Got to fucking love a 10 track 41 minute.
My only thing is that, is it going to be Unsung? Because I feel like it's probably going to be fairly high up on the on end of year lists.
Maybe.
And I think it's sold fairly well.
I think when you balance that out though with commercial viability, clear, like her standing for, as I said, like a barometer of that, based on where she's appearing in festivals, she is not.
Yeah, that's true. You've got Bon Iver playing the Hydro in March.
Yeah,
she's not playing the Hydro.
No, not even close.
Yeah,
she's lucky if she gets an opening slot on a tour with Bon Iver.
Yeah, exactly.
So, no, I think she's under-acknowledged. I think she's got better tunes than Bon Iver as well. Just putting that out there.
I think it's. I like the ambition of it, and I've brought in a lot of records that are somewhat imperfect. I think this is her best work, and I actually liked. I listened to a lot of her stuff, even the earlier stuff, and I like this record a lot. I think you should go in.
Cool, nice one,
great,
mint it.
Agreed. Dealt with.
Bit of a fucking awkward nexus we got this week, though.
Yeah, so who chose this nexus?
This is Craig Scott.
And we've got to get from Sharon Van Etten to...
former and now deceased, disgraced Toronto Mayor Rob Ford.
Former, deceased and disgraced. The Holy Trinity.
This is the first time we're seeing Nexus tonight. Will it be the last? What do they have in store for us? Not good for...
Why am I here? You're in the Nexus. This is the Nexus. For you, this is what you want.
Yeah, kick off, Chris.
Well, I mean, I think just to be clear, so we have some context, as Mark says, deceased, disgraced, former...
Mayor.
Balding mayor of Toronto. No, he wasn't the bald one. It's his brother Doug Ford's the bald one. Is that right?
Yeah. No, I think he was going bald. He was definitely going bald.
There you go. So yeah, Rob Ford was the mayor of Toronto from 2010.
Famous meth head.
2000 and what?
Famous meth head.
Meth head. Yeah, 2014. He was famously filmed smoking crack with gang members. He had a history of drug and alcohol problems and some domestic violence, sort of police call-outs, albeit those incidents were dismissed by the police because they said that it seemed like the wife couldn't be consistent in her story, so we don't know what the deal is with that. But he was asked to step down, refused to step down. His duties ended up getting passed on to his deputy, and he died of a rare form of cancer and somewhere in the abdomen. I don't know too much about it, in 2016. So that's who Rob Ford was, because he is possibly one of the most obscure links we could do. So from a Nexus, Sharon Van Etten recorded a track called The End of the World for the official soundtrack of The Man in the High Castle, the series on Amazon.
Cool.
The Man in the High Castle was written by the writer Philip K. Dick, a very famous, very respected sci-fi writer, lefty activist, very interesting guy actually. As part of Philip K. Dick's fascinating life story, in the early 70s he started writing to the FBI, and the gist of these letters was that he'd been approached by a secret Nazi cabal who were looking to persuade sci-fi... I always get Nazis in, man. No.
Every fucking time.
They were looking to persuade sci-fi writers, specifically sci-fi writers, to include coded ideas in their works in order to try and penetrate the US public psyche. Bearing in mind that Philip K. Dick was an outspoken lefty, and The Man in the High Castle was a critique of Nazism in the right wing.
He's also had, apart from being something of a psychonaut, he also had like a lot of mental health problems as well.
Yeah. He was in it.
Fucking fascinating guy though.
And so as a result, the FBI didn't know how seriously to take this, clearly. He said, by the way, that the code was called SolarCon 6. So there you go. It's a pretty elaborate story that unfolded across a series of letters, which included a detail about a type of super syphilis, which was going to be used to initiate World War III by the Nazi cabal. Although then he decided that the super syphilis thing was like a kind of red herring designed to set off panic in the USA. It also included details of a guy called Harold Kincher and a bunch of others who were connected to the Minutemen, who were a famous American militia, still are to some extent. Anyway, so in one of the final installments, Philip K. Dick contacted the FBI again about a book called Camp Concentration by a writer called Thomas Dish, which apparently the story was based around a form of super syphilis that made soldiers like super intelligent but also killed them within like 9 months or something like that. Philip K. Dick saw the plot and then saw that plot being in there as proof of the conspiracy he'd been describing of the Nazis trying to get this scenario put into sci-fi writing. Now that book, Camp Concentration by Thomas Dish, features a whole series of subplots and references to Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, including characters and sort of parallels and various things. And in 2017 there was a rock opera version of Faust by the director Dr. Rudolf Volz, and in that adaptation of Faust, the character of Faust and the music in it actually was based on Gene Simmons and Kiss. and the makeup was so close as well. Now Gene Simmons has a website, unsurprisingly genesimmons.com, and in 2010 genesimmons.com was one of a small clutch of websites that was specifically targeted by the Anonymous Collective.
Remember that?
And taken down due to Gene Simmons' very hardline and outspoken stance against file sharing. By the way, the person that took it down got caught, and Gene Simmons, I don't know what the result of the court case was, but he depressed for 15 years in jail for taking down genesimmons.com. Wow. So, and also, Anonymous announced prior to the ultimate discovery that Rob Ford's crack tape was out and about in Alberta, Canada, when nobody could really track it down. And then it suddenly appeared after they put that announcement out. So there you go, Rob Ford.
Pretty good.
Nazis.
Yeah, Nazis. They've got any Nazis for us?
No, I've got some beavers though.
Oh yeah.
So Sharon Van Etten, before she started releasing music, worked at Bada Bing Records.
That's right, yeah.
In the States.
I thought you were going to say she was part of a beaver conservation society or something.
She's part of a Nazi beaver cabal.
So Bada Bing is based in New Jersey, I think. Oh no, Brooklyn. And their releases include Beirut, Julie Byrne, and Sarah Davachi, who I've listened to quite a lot of. She's like a ambient sort of sound artist from Canada. Really, really cool stuff. But Sarah Davachi, she's a graduate of the University of Calgary, but she's also lectured at Vancouver Film School and also Simon Fraser University, which is a university somewhere in Canada.
No relation.
But it's, no relation to Mr. Mark Fraser. Do you have a cousin called Simon? Probably. Everybody's got
I don't know. I do have family in Canada, but I don't know them very well.
Do you have any universities named after you?
Not in countries that are reputable.
North Korea, Mark Fraser, Pyongyang University, Polytechnic.
A life misspent.
So the Simon Fraser University is a public research university in British Columbia, and it's named after a Scottish, he's of Scottish ancestry, a fur trader and explorer who charted much of what is now the Canadian province of British Columbia. He went far west, and he's got mountains and rivers named after him and everything.
See, Mark, what you been doing?
I know what I've been doing, Molly.
Exactly. Well, at the age of 14, Simon Fraser moved to Montreal for schooling and ended up getting fairly involved in the fur trade.
It was easier back then.
Well, yeah,
there was less history.
Well, the fur trade.
I could have discovered penicillin. I have had loads of mouldy food in my cupboard now.
Well, the fur trade, was a huge thing between the newly found North American colonies and back home in Asia.
This is going down a very deep hole.
Culminated in that famous fight, the Beaver Wars. The Beaver Wars encompass a series of conflicts fought intimately during the 17th century in America.
I'm pretty sure that's a Pornhub term.
And there were battles for sort of economic welfare throughout a whole area around the Great Lakes and stuff like that, and they were fought between indigenous tribes and France and Britain and Scotland and all these things.
Did you do this before you got here?
Why?
Because if you managed to get via the Beaver Wars in the time you were sitting there,
I'd started a little bit, but do you know what? I just decided the middle needs spicing up a little bit, so hence the Beaver Wars.
Spicy beaver.
But the Beaver Wars had a huge amount of wait, what am I trying to say?
You don't even need to say anything. Beaver Wars is going to become like one of those trademark moments of the show.
Well, yeah, so the Beaver Wars led to a sort of a wee black hole in history, because like a lot of
there's so much innuendo. Come on,
a lot of
too much innuendo.
Native, oh jeez, what am I trying to say? The Beaver Wars led to a lot of native tribes being obliterated, as was the Western way of just getting rid of lots of local folk. Now you can see this because there's basically a big gap in the writing of a certain historian and explorer. He was called Etienne Brule, who was the first European explorer to journey beyond the St. Lawrence River in what is now known as Canada. And he had spent time with many of the tribes that were then obliterated in the Beaver Wars. Etienne
How many
Brule,
times have you said that?
Etienne Brule was happened to be the first European to encounter the Humber River in Ontario when he was travelling through Canada. The Humber River has a small park and a playground at one point on it, which is named the Douglas B. Ford Park. Douglas B. Ford is the father of a Mr. Rob Ford. Douglas B. Ford was a Canadian businessman and politician in Ontario, and he has two sons, both of whom are in politics. One of them is deceased and disgraced.
So you wanted to spice that up, so something got chopped and replaced with the entire history of Canada and the Beaver Wars.
Yeah.
That's I guess that's how it goes, eh? That's how it goes sometimes.
Add some
Follow
beaver in
that
there.
then, Mark.
Well, unfortunately I didn't have a lot of time to do my Nexus because of some stuff and work today. So mine's is a bit short, perhaps mercifully brief.
Thank you.
After these,
Is there any innuendo?
there is not.
Can you squeeze some in?
No, not really. Okay, so in 2015 at the NYC Bowery Ballroom, Sharon Van Etten played Neil Fest, which is a tribute festival to Neil Young. Also featured the likes of Norah Jones, Ryan Adams, Brian Fallon from the Gaslight Anthem, and many others.
Sounds really boring.
It probably was super dull. In the 1990 video for Fucking Up by Neil Young, he is wearing a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey. He actually used to be a huge Maple Leafs fan until 2011 when the franchise for Winnipeg started up, the Winnipeg Jets, and he then switched his allegiance to that team.
North American sport fucking confuses me.
Yeah.
Or depresses me.
Incidentally, did you know that Neil Young's dad
No.
was a really well-known sports writer and broadcaster in Canada, and he used to be a host on Hockey Night in Canada until he really annoyed the Maple Leafs owner John Bassett, and then they demanded that he be sacked or they pulled their sponsorship from the show.
There you go.
Yeah. So,
I did know that, actually.
More Canadian knowledge.
Canadian knowledge. In 2009, former Toronto Mayor and famous drug addict Rob Ford attended a Toronto Maple Leafs game where a couple sitting next to him filed a complaint to the City of Toronto because he was drunk, he was swearing, and he was insulting people. And at the time, he was only a councillor in Toronto, and still managed to get made mayor after that.
I know, pretty good.
Yeah, I mean,
gives us hope.
After he got caught smoking crack with gang members, he stayed mayor.
Yeah.
Like his whole term, he served his whole term.
Well, he said, you will see that video and people deserve to see that video and just judge me on what the video shows. And the video shows him smoking crack with some gang members, and people just went, yeah, that's fine. That's
the
fine.
kind of mayor that we want.
I noticed how his excuse was that he was so drunk that he smoked crack.
Oh, we've all been there.
That happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, wow, okay, that was a pretty good set. Fucking unparalleled knowledge of Canada now.
Yeah.
That's us, I know.
So who's next week?
Does I?
It's you, Mark.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess Punk.
No, not really. I'm going to do Pass the Flask by The Bled.
We were discussing this last week. Okay, he's gone for it.
Yeah, so they're...
You say pasta flask or
Pass.
pasta flask?
Pasta flask, yeah.
Pasta flask.
Stick your macaroni and keep it hot.
Interesting name for a record, yeah. So Pasta Flask by The Bled. The Bled were a kind of metalcore, mathcore, post-hardcore band from the early 2000s. I think they split up in 2011. Pasta Flask is a really good record, I think. And they're a band that I think a lot of people have forgotten. They were also fucking properly incendiary live as well. They were crazy. But yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about that.
So you want to pick a Nexus set?
Yeah, let me do it.
Listeners, we would be very happy to get some more Nexus suggestions.
Yes, please.
Who have we got? The Bled to
Warren Ellis.
To Warren
the
Ellis.
writer.
Okay.
Warren Ellis, the writer, as opposed to Warren Ellis, the musician.
Yeah.
Who suggested that?
The North. It's also North Race on Twitter. So that's he's a patron. So
okay.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, the North
Not
Race.
a person, but a patron.
Thanks, Patreon.
I can't remember his name right now. I think it's Bruce Race. I think his name is.
That's
Okay,
a good name. That's
All right, we'll try and get to Warren Ellis, the writer.
all right. Did you ever cover their tunes? The high school band has really dropped off the radar in the last 6 months.
Yeah, that's true. Dimmer haven't been involved lately. We'll have to get back on. Maybe I'll do a NoFX album or
You
something.
found any demos yet? Well, the pop punk live episode is going to be an excuse to do that.
Yeah, that's true. We still haven't decided on our albums yet.
When's that coming up?
It's taking place on the 22nd of November on the Flying Duck. Is that right?
Yes.
Absolutely not.
No, it's the 28th of November. Sunday the 28th of November at the Flying Duck in Glasgow.
So it is. It's taking place on the 28th of November on the Flying Duck.
You can buy tickets for £4.
Mark will also be there on the 22nd.
Yeah, I will be there on the 22nd.
Looking confused.
Yeah, scratching my head.
You can buy tickets online for £4 or £5 on the door. I think that's pretty good. That's cheaper than a gig that I would go to.
It'll be hilarious, and we have some live entertainment in the intermission, as we did last time, on the theme. And we're going to do our best to be sober and amusing.
So you can go click attending on our Facebook event, which will be up by now, and buy a ticket, and it'll be fun.
Yeah,
we'll talk about pop punk.
You can heckle.
I've got to decide what
heckling allowed.
What non-pop punk t-shirt to wear. I actually just found the At the Drive-In t-shirt that you've also got, the one with the cassette on it. I thought I'd lost it.
It's the closest I'm going to get.
Yeah, I know, me too. Maybe we can both wear it.
I once made
get one.
I made a Dookie t-shirt when I was younger. You know, the cover of Dookie. Yeah.
What, like one of those print-off t-shirt screen prints?
Yeah.
You still got it?
Maybe.
Iron on.
If you still have it, you should definitely wear it.
It will not look flattering.
That'd be great though.
I was 9 stone then, man.
Yeah, I used to have a green Blink-182 hoodie that everybody borrowed, and I basically never got to wear it, but I don't know where it's gone. Used to have thumb holes. Remember hoodies?
Oh yeah.
Thumb holes in the hoodie. Yeah. Anyway, pop punk, that'll be fun. But next up is metalcore. All right, thanks very much. Go vote for Sharon Van Etten on our Facebook page. Thanks.
Back to the God channel for me.